Dave, I don't know what brought this idea and this memory back to my mind, but I remembered a time long ago when I was in my early 30s. Remember when you're in your late 20s and early 30s and everybody in your social circle starts getting married and you spend every summer either getting married or renting a tuxedo to be in somebody else's wedding, and it's just like all the time is made up with doing that.
It's actually a super expensive, like 5 to 10 year window where you're like dropping $100 here, $500 here, $1,000 here. You're like, geez Louise, these are expensive weddings.
Yeah, and it's easier on the people that have to rent tuxes because the people that have to buy dresses are even more money. You rent a tux you can rent, for crying out loud. So it was one of my very close friends from college, and we had absolutely closed the place down at his wedding. And it was me and a bunch of the other groomsmen, a bunch of the people that were standing up in the wedding. And of course, the bride and the groom closed this reception hall down. And we wanted pizza. We wanted food. We were hungry. You know, it was like we'd been doing a lot of drinking, not a whole lot of eating. And we decided we wanted food. So we went walking around. And this was either Lansing or Grand Rapids. My memory gets foggy onto this point. But we're walking around downtown someplace in Michigan. And we find this pizza place with the lights still on. And we run over there and the doors are locked. There's one young 20-year-old kid just mopping up. He looks at us forlornly and says, "We're closed. We're closed." My buddy knocks on the window, says, just come here. I want to talk. The kid comes over and the guy says, "What do you got to do before you're off tonight?" He says, "I just got to finish mopping the floor. Everything's pretty much done. I got to do this, do that, but everything's pretty much done." He goes, "How about this? You sit over there. We'll clean up the place. Let us make a couple of pizzas and pour a couple of sodas.
Let us make a couple of pizzas.
We'll clean up after ourselves. All you got to do, you got any place you got to go tonight?" He goes, "No." He goes, "You sit there," and we all start throwing promises at him, right? Just sit over there. We'll take care of everything. The kid says, "You know what?"
By the way, life advice: always trust a drunk. This is you can take it to the bank. That's going to be a spotless and clean pizza place.
So this kid says, "You know what? I don't fucking care. Go ahead." So he lets us in. We fire up the ovens. We start breaking into teams. There's some people over there making pizzas. There's some people over there filling pitchers with sodas. There's a couple of us over here. We make a couple of pizzas, enough for everybody, including we let the kid have pizza too, because why not? We all sit there eating pizza and drinking sodas. Then when we get done, we get up and we clean that place out. All of us cleaning, making sure that the ovens were turned off. Then they were powered down, cleaning up, mopped up the floor. And then we all sat there and just started peeling off, bills to pay this kid. And everybody was so happy. We threw all kinds. We must have come up with a couple $100 by the time we were done because it was such an amazing night, right?
Yeah.
We throw a couple $100 at this kid, thank him, let him finish up, and we walked back to the hotel and finished out the night. It was probably one of the most incredible nights of my entire life.
That's amazing. And at that exact moment, for reasons that they never understood, the insurance underwriter for that pizza place, their head was tingling the entire time you were there, and they couldn't figure out why they were tingling. But they're like, "Why should I be nervous about a bunch of drunks handling an oven that goes to 2,000 degrees or whatever it is?"
Yeah, and I'm sure everything will be fine.
Yeah, there's no way that this can go wrong. Everything's going to be just fine. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about burning down a pizza place and making comics.
And making pizza and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, the author of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is also made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics. Now, I have to ask you about your facial reaction there because I used author for the first time and you gave the funniest little smirk. What was that all about?
I thought you were trying to take the wind out of me or something. It was the first time I heard that word come out of your mouth.
I was absolutely not trying to make fun of you. I was actually trying on like a pair of pants at Sears. I was trying on the word author and see how I felt about it in terms of self-description. Didn't like it. Didn't like it. Not going to use it again. You'll never hear that from me again.
Did not like those Hager, relaxed fit, slim jeans. And that's how I know you shop at Sears, because you know the brand.
I know how, yeah, of course. And they bunch in all the wrong places. Sure, you're saving an extra $15, but it's not where you want to be pinched. That's the problem. It's not a pinch you want. It's not a pinch you want. I'm also going to say that you could be listening to this show live right now at patreon.com/ComicLab. We have the Live Gab group joins us every week for the live stream of the show. And there's also a concurrent chat that runs alongside. And if you happen to miss the live stream for Life Lover Learning, it is archived, so you can watch the live stream back later on. And just like a good, nice, tight-fitting pair of Hager pants from Sears, it'll get you where you need to
go. Well, speaking of where we need to go to our first topic today. And what we wanted to talk about here, Dave found this amazing clip of Stan Lee discussing the Marvel method of creating comics. And we want to play that for you, and then we're going to talk about it. So listen to this. Stan Lee, and this was, by the way, this was early Stan Lee. This had to be, judging from the shades and the amount of dark in his hair, it had to have been 70s.
Yeah, 70s. It's very much the power years of Stan Lee, if you know what I mean by that. Oh. Also, I should mention that this comes to us via, because we should also always source our sources here. And this comes from Alex Grand, who is a comics historian, and this happened to come from TikTok. Oh. So Alex Grand dug up this clip of, because I had never seen this before from Stan Lee. And I don't think Brad had either. And a lot of my other comic friends that I forwarded this to hadn't seen it either. So let's hit play, and then we'll talk about it afterward.
We don't work the way other people do. I don't think we do anything the way other people do. The average comic book company, in writing a script, writes the comic script the way a playwright writes a play. They just, instead of writing act 1, scene 1, and then the dialogue, the writer will write page 1, panel 1, and he'll give the stage directions. Superman walking down the street, and suddenly a kryptonite brick hits him on the head. Panel 2, Superman says, ouch, and it goes on like that. We don't do it that way. Now, why don't we do it that way? We don't do it that way because years ago, I used to write all the stories. And after a while, I wasn't able to write quickly enough to keep 10 or 15 artists busy at one time. So I'd be writing a story for Spider-Man. I'd be sitting and writing, and some guy would walk in and he'd say, Stan, I need a script for the Fantastic Four. And I'd say, well, I can't give it to you now because I didn't finish my Spider-Man story. And he'd say, well, I can't sit around doing nothing, and the only way I could solve this virtually insolvable problem was to say, look, I tell you what, I will tell you what the plot is of your story. I'll give you the story line. You go ahead and draw it. Bring me the drawings later, and I'll put the dialogue in later. So he would go off to his little ingle nook, wherever he did his artwork, and he would draw the story based on the plot that I gave him. And I'd be finishing the story. Then another guy came in, and I'd say to him, okay, look, this is the story I want you to tell. Just make it 20 pages. Go ahead and draw it. We'll put the dialogue in later. I found out I could keep 10, 20 guys busy that way. They were all drawing whatever they were drawing. I didn't even know what they were doing. It would come in. It was like doing a crossword puzzle. I had forgotten the plot I gave them. I'm looking at these 20 pages of nothing, and I've got to make a story out of it. But I found that it was great because it kept me interested. I wasn't bored. It was, as I say, it was like doing a puzzle. They loved it because nobody was telling them what to draw. And being lazy, they were doing the easiest drawings at each panel. But the stories actually turned out better.
So there's a lot to unpack there, Dave. There's a lot of Stan Lee swagger. There's a lot of shop talk. There's a lot of insider information there. But I think the headline is that was an absolutely bonkers way to create comics.
It is. It's funny because, I've had it described for me over the years of how they worked. And I was like, that's interesting. But then you think about it in practice, it is an absolutely bonkers way to make comics. The fact that they had interesting stories ever come out was a credit to everybody involved, because that's a weird way to make a story. That is a weird way to do it.
Well, not only that, but you can now see if you've never been really intrinsically involved in these stories, you can see now why a lot of people give Jack Kirby so much credit for creating the Marvel Universe, and Steve Ditko as well. They never got their due writing credit, but you can see that Kirby, Ditko, all of those people who were teamed with Stan Lee, especially in the early days, really did a lot of the writing, because it's one thing for Stan to say, I gave him the plot and then told them to do, 20 pages and then throw in that little, I didn't like this, where he said they were lazy, so they did the easiest drawings possible. I think was a shot that was beneath his stature at that time. But if you're filling 20 pages, you're doing a lot of storytelling. You're figuring out how that plot unfolds. And if you've ever seen Jack Kirby's originals for Fantastic Four, for example, he was putting story notes underneath every panel, almost like a storyboard would be, where he was saying this happens, and then that happens, and then this happens. Well, that's writing. That's writing. Somebody gave you the plot, but now you've taken that and you've implied your own internal 3-act structure to it, and you've decided how that's going to go. Stan filled in the dialogue for that, but that writing, it under that structure that he himself discussed, it really was a shared writing credit.
Yeah, it really was. And what's interesting to me listening to that clip, and in general listening to Stan talk about his years, is how, now listen, I know that the margins of Marvel were actually pretty tight, and they almost went bankrupt about 15 different times. So I understand that it was a really tight margins, but it also speaks to, and I think we can talk about this, the quiet egotism that Stan Lee had, that only he could have written these stories. Because God forbid you hire another 23-year-old writer and pass off some of these to them. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, fantastic. I had to have 48 guys go off to work. Couldn't waste a moment. They were all reliant on me. I was the absolute logjam of creativity and everyone, But it is a weird sort of thing. It was like, hire another writer. Get somebody. They don't have to be $100,000 a year, but you could hire a 23-year-old, 28-year-old, 30-year-old. But Stan, I think, had to. I mean, yes, again, the margins were super tight, but I think Stan required emotionally that they all go through him, Well, and I think it comes down to ego at that point. And I mean, listen, who am I speaking as the guy who has been saying for years that he wants to hire an assistant and just haven't been able to find that perfect connection. Sometimes as creative people, we have a little bit of a hard time giving up the reins on a certain amount of creative control. And I count myself among them. There's absolutely.
When there are some like there's one, and it's my colorist Alex Heberling. Now, when I find somebody like that I can truly trust intrinsically, Alex gets very few notes from me. Alex knows what to do. She knows what the situation is. She does it, and anything she does that is, she's got carte blanche for the most part. But how many times do you meet somebody like that you're able to really give them full creative leeway? It's tough. I kind of find myself identifying with Stan a little bit, because I have it's hard to find that person that you can truly trust like that.
I'm glad you personalized that, because as soon as you said that, it actually humbled me, because my wonderful, wonderful assistant of 5 or 6 years now, Beth, is going to go on a 6-month leave coming up. And I'm having so much trouble just beginning the process of hiring someone to cover those 6 months, because not only do I trust Beth intrinsically, she knows every part of the process of Kickstarting, of Patreon, of how we run this whole business, from convention start to bottom. So what I'm saying is you're right to personalize it, because that immediately makes me go, all right, maybe Stan figured out a way that worked and he was keeping it together the best he could, doing what he knew how to do. Yeah. But it's for anyone who's written a story, it's such an interesting way. And he described it as a crossword puzzle, because he was filling it in. And I imagine, first of all, let's give credit to Stan. I know that he egotistically grabs more than he should historically of what he created, but even if we parcel it out to Ditko and to everybody else, he still created an amazing amount of fascinating characters and situations and storylines. Right. So there was a genius there, but it's interesting how he had to keep it interesting to him as well in terms of what could probably feel like rote creating.
Yeah, that's the other part that my ears perked up at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the same way that people are saying, oh, Marvel Phase 5's movies are starting to feel rote because it's kind of the same story over and over again. Imagine being Stan Lee, where you're cranking out 5 to 10 books a month. And doing that 12 times a year, and now you're on year 10 of that. That's going to start feeling rote. And so I imagine for him, it was like, how do I make this puzzle work? This is fun again,
Yeah, and even if you don't give him full credit for creating, even if you say, okay, he co-created a lot of that stuff, everything that Dave said is absolutely true. Is that at some point as a creator, once you achieve a certain point of sustainability, the challenge becomes keeping yourself interested, keeping yourself tuned in, keeping yourself up to the challenge. Because that's a big part of it too. Like at some point, it gets very tempting to get called off by other things or to take on other pathways. And it was very interesting to hear him say, "This kept me interested," because that's a part of the creative process that we don't talk about all that much.
Yeah, it's sort of, if you have a job that for decades on end is sort of rote repetition, we often had that cultural phrase for a while there, going postal, with the idea that a job that was so rote and so repetitious that you're like, I can't take this anymore. Yeah. So I know I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for Brad. One of the reasons why Brad has allowed himself to do the single panels and the monthly themed shorts and stuff like that, and why I've allowed myself to do like Anatomy of Dinosaurs or Anatomy of Authors or things like that, is it's just you gotta allow the brain a new path to walk down creatively from time to time. Yeah. Because you can't keep doing, and that's why I give all credit to Schultz and to others like Schultz that were able to walk the same path for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, because I don't know that I could do it that way.
Well, and see, I also give the same credit to Watterson and Breathed, who stepped away from it, and said, okay, I'm going to go do something else. For even Gary Trudeau taking time off and then coming back. You also have to give credit to them as well, because that's what they needed to do. Like I get, like when we did that talk at the Schultz Museum, that one guy had a question for us. He's like, that basically came down to, well, these kids can't do it anymore the way Schultz did it. They don't have the stamina to stick with it. And it's like, well, that's one way of looking at it, but it's also another way to say, like somebody like Watterson did what he wanted to do and then felt that he had achieved it, didn't want to go past the purpose and then went another direction. I think that's valid too.
Well, and we hadn't planned this, Brad, but since we brought up Watterson a couple times, I should mention, just as a fun update for everyone, in terms of keeping yourself creatively fresh. If you had not seen it, and you probably have, Bill Watterson has a new work coming out called The Mysteries that he has partnered with John Kascht to put out. And I'm just happy for Bill that he's doing something new. I think that's really fun that he's creatively found a new outlet, and how fun after decades and decades to have a new project coming out into the market. So if you have not looked for it, The Mysteries is coming out, I think, in October, from Bill Watterson and John Kascht. And John, I apologize, we have not met, so I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But have you met John?
I have not. I have not. He's got some pieces hanging. He's a caricaturist mainly, and he's got some pieces hanging in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. So he's got pedigree. He's got credentials. He's
got the chops. I mean, I don't have anything hanging in the National Gallery. That's for dang sure. Unless you consider the National Gallery the back urinal of the 7-Eleven in Poughkeepsie. That's the only place I've got something hanging in the National Gallery.
What were you hanging out back there doing?
No, I'm not hanging out there. My artwork is on the walls. It's hanging proudly. I told you this story, right? So I sold.
No, but I'm eager to hear it.
You're gonna love the egotistical come down from this. So I sold an original art to Google, not a person, but to Google one time, right? They bought one of my originals. And Brad, I was walking on cloud nine. I felt so big about myself, like, oh, look at me. Oh, hey, I got a piece hanging in the Google lobby. Oh, I got a thing hanging in the Google lobby. And I happened to mention this one time. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast. I mentioned it on air or on my blog or something. Hey, I have a piece in the Google lobby. And I had a Google employee email me and say, hey, I work in that building. What is the piece and what does it look like so I can go look for it? So I emailed him what the piece is. And like a week or two later, he emails me or she emails me back and says, hey, I found the piece. It's hanging up in a hallway, all right. The service stairway that mostly the janitors right outside that door is where that piece is hanging. What a come down, Brad. I went from like, oh, look at me, aren't I important, to being like, oh, well, I guess I'm hanging up in a service stairway.
Some of the finest janitor closet art you'll ever see in your life.
All right, well, Brad, in addition to Watterson, we got a couple of fun updates to give everybody. Well, fun in relative terms. Some of them are fun, some of them are not so fun. The first one is actually very fun. And this is for everyone who has not yet joined us on Patreon, because we have a resource now that I'm really proud it exists and going forward will always exist in our archives. On episode 270 of ProTips, which is a secondary podcast that we record every week for Patreon members. And ProTips goes deep on 3 to 4 topics that really are applicable to your art, your business, your creativity, and how you conduct yourself in your career. We have a ProTips episode that went up on March 7th. It's episode 270 of ProTips. It is a 50-minute long pro tip just on self-publishing. Everything you need to know about printing a 4K, or not a 4K, a 4-color offset book. And how to do it, all the terminology involved, the things to look at when you're getting quotes, how to approach getting quotes, how to handle it in terms of what numbers to use and how to think about it. And I think it's one of the best episodes of Pro Tips we've ever recorded.
Yeah, we ended up going very deep on that, and it walks you through a lot of stuff that, frankly, is probably like question marks that you already have if you're going to do your first offset run. And it talks about like how to get a quote, how to read the quote, because it ends up using a lot of terminology, a lot of jargon that you're not familiar with. We familiarize yourself with all of that stuff, and we go through and just take some real time and explain it. I went back and listened to it. It's a really, really informative, useful Pro Tips episode.
Yeah. So it's everything from what types of paper we suggest, how we suggest you solicit the quote, how you react to the quote, how you get more than one quote against different people, how you plan for 5 to 10% over-unders in terms of print runs, which a lot of new first-time printers, and by that I mean you, might not be ready for in terms of your budget with your Kickstarter. So, and then when to place the order if you're kickstarting the book, and how to handle all of that. So it's really, it goes deep in the weeds in a way that I think is approachable and helpful. And frankly, I wish I had been able to listen to 16 books ago when I was doing that first one, because we talk about how it's nerve-wracking no matter where you are in the process to commit to that final email where you click approve and you are sending off that final book file, and off it goes, and nothing can be fixed after that, because there's a very real permanence to that. So it's a whole conversation about that process, how to do it, how to handle it, the numbers you need to know. And I think you're really going to enjoy it no matter where you are in your self-publishing.
Absolutely. So here's another update. And although the news item is going to be a little bit old, there's something that I wanted to talk about because it brought up a really important topic that has broad applications for us as independents. And it is this: Twitter recently made a change so that using two-factor authentication, you could no longer use text messages to get your two-factor authentication code. You could no longer do that unless you were a Twitter Blue subscriber. And that had a lot of people sharing what was frankly misinformation because they didn't really understand it very well. Here's what actually happened. Twitter did remove text messaging for 2FA, but when you disable that, it immediately takes you to a place where you go through and you have the option of using an alternate two-factor authentication method, such as an authenticator app. Here's the thing that I wanted to talk about. Actually, there's two things, but the first thing is authenticator apps are more secure than text messages. Okay, text messages can get intercepted. You can get SIM switched. There's text messages are good. Those codes you get for two-factor authentication, those little codes you get are good for 30 minutes. Okay, on an authenticator app, those codes are good for 30 seconds. Right, and if you've ever used an authenticator app, and I use Google Authenticator, you see that those numbers switch over every 30 seconds. You've got just enough time to put that in and key it in and unlock your site or whatever you're trying to get to. So in general, the first thing is if you ever have a choice between setting up SMS or text message authentication or an authenticator app, go with the authenticator. It's more secure. The second thing I wanted to talk about is, once again, we have amazing evidence that all this BS about Elon Musk being such an amazing business person is bunk, because he totally trotted this out backwards. Anybody with an ounce of business sense wouldn't have said only Twitter Blue subscribers are going to be able to keep text messaging. Anybody with an ounce would have said, hey, great news. Twitter is so interested and passionate about your security. We're going to help you move to an authenticator app, which is more secure and get you off text messages. Anybody with an ounce would have framed it that way. And by the way, we know the real reason they're doing it. Text messages are expensive.
Yeah.
It was a cost-cutting measure. And as we said on this show a long time ago, everything that Musk does from this point on has got to be either cost-cutting or profit increasing. Every decision he makes. And by the way, if he does everything he can possibly do, it's still going to come crumbling down. Yep. But this is a good chance to just help you understand, if you have a choice, authenticator apps are the way to go.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where two things can be true at the same time. Brad is right that authenticator apps are better. They're more secure. I use them for a couple of different things. They're also a bigger pain in the ass in that I have had twice now in my life a phone either dropped and shattered, or a phone that completely died for reasons that was completely out of my control. And because the authenticator app was tied to that phone, I was locked out of a couple different things from Google Authenticator. Now there might be settings that I'm not familiar with it in terms of having my Google Authenticator tied to my Google account. But anyway, I could never have made that work for me. I don't know what I did wrong. Anyway.
So are you saying that when you dropped your phone, you could still get text messages?
No, yes, I could. Well, no, but when I got a new phone, Google Authenticator reinstalled would not work because it's tied to that specific series of digits on that phone. Yeah.
I'll be darned.
Because it doesn't want to allow you to have any sort of, phone that's pretending to be another phone. Anyway, long story short, I have since figured out that you can do an authenticator app within 1Password. And I currently use that with, I think, my QuickBooks. And boy, is that really nice to have it within 1Password. I highly recommend it. Because then it's frankly, it treats it like a separate password at that point. But you see the little time thing on the side of 1Password. Anyway, long story short. So two things can be true at once. It is better to use an authenticator app, although if you have people using SMS, it is still an infinitely stupid idea to have them go backwards in safety to no two-factor authentication, which we all agree is worse. So it is, and if you have to do it, it's also, and Musk has to do it because he's scraping for money anywhere he can, including not paying janitors and rent. But if you have to do it, like Brad said, there's a better marketing and publicity way to do this, where you say, we're looking for better solutions for you for your security, not, hey, dumb shits, we got to save $60 million a year in text messages. So no more two-factor authentication for anybody. Because frankly, it's the super users that were using two-factor authentication anyway. Those are the people that are the tastemakers on Twitter are using two-factor authentication because they know how important it is. So if you scare those people off, it's just another sign that they're doing it wrong over there. They're not. It's another sign that we're in the death spiral for that site.
Well, and that all ties in with the topic of enshittification that we talked about a couple episodes ago.
Yes.
And that, of course, brings me to my next update for the day. I've got bad news. And I guess this has been out there for a while, but it was the first time that I'd paid attention to it. Because like I said, I had completely written Reddit off a long time ago. And after the Twitter thing started happening, I got rid of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram on my phone. And I started giving Reddit another look. And I got to tell you, I really like what I've been able to start putting together on Reddit. And then I read a news piece that absolutely sunk my heart. They're going to be releasing an IPO later on this year, which means they're going to be a publicly traded stock. And of course, that means that Reddit's own personal process of enshittification will start to happen momentarily after that IPO is released. Yeah. So the end is near.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, the spiral might take a few years, but the writing is on the wall when the IPO happens about what tends to happen to social media sites after that. And you could see it coming that they were getting ready for the IPO because by God, they were pushing the app for like a year and a half, 2 years in a way that you couldn't do anything on Reddit without them being like, hey, it's so much better on the app. Hey, try it on the app. Oh, hey, the app works great. Because they're clearly trying to build up their user numbers for the IPO. But I will say, in the interim, I have had increasing success with Reddit that in a way that I have not in the past. And a lot of credit is due to our peers and fellow pros who are showing Brad and I the way to use Reddit. And so I think in a way that might be helpful to everyone, we should have a show coming up where we talk about what we've learned and what we've gleaned from Reddit and sort of the best practices that we're starting to see forming around that maybe other cartoonists already know, but we're learning again. Because even if, I'll say this, Brad, even if Reddit is on the enshittification death spiral after the IPO, and it probably is, we probably have 2 to 5 years left of it still being a useful tool and platform for us.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. It'll take a little bit more time for it to happen.
And just for the reminder for everybody who might not have caught that episode, what is the 3 or 4 encapsulating ideas of enshittification of how a platform first comes for their users, then comes, you can explain it better.
Oh yeah. The idea is, and this was Cory Doctorow that came up with this whole kind of theory or this series of ideas, and we borrowed from him and talked about it. But the first thing is, when you first have a platform, you make it really, really great for the users. Everything is wonderful for the users. And there was also that talk of the giant teddy bear, right? Where they were talking about how sometimes TikTok supposedly would heat certain posts to make it go viral. And you'd think, oh my God, I'm a TikTok star. This is great, right? So the first part is making things really great for the users. Then the second part is they make things a little bit not so good for the users, and they make things really, really good for the businesses and the advertisers. And they bring all the business and the advertisers in, and they try to get them to really lock into their platform the way we saw Facebook did when they allegedly gamed their video stats. And they got a whole bunch of people from business and advertising to come over and lock into that.
Brought down College Humor, yeah.
Yeah. And once they've got the users in place, once they've got the businesses in place, then they make things worse for both of those groups, and they claw back all of that value for themselves. And then, according to Cory, then the platform dies. And I really do think we're seeing that on Facebook. I think Facebook is probably the furthest along. Like I said, I took it off my phone. I will jump into Facebook maybe once a day or so just to see if I've got a message, and then like I'm out. I don't spend any time. There's nothing worth reading there. But the type of ads that I've seen, Dave, are literally porn ads. Like I've seen I've seen body parts that I never thought that I'd see on Facebook.
Oh, really?
And these are seriously. And it's just an indication that they are so desperate for money. They're taking advertising from anybody at this point, as long as that cash clears, because they're certainly not going through these, sifting through them, or they're not judging them as closely as they used to. Something's happening, because that level of advertising that we're seeing, and you're probably seeing it on yourself, even if you're not seeing something that drastic. You're seeing the quality of ads are really questionable these days. Yeah. And to my opinion, that's might be an indication that they're really struggling for money.
Yeah, and I think the sheer volume, the sheer heights that Facebook is starting from means that it's going to be many years until we really see them fall apart, because frankly, their user base was gigantic worldwide. And honestly, if we're all being honest about it, the users that are 60, 65 or older, they're not leaving Facebook because it's the only way they know how to contact Aunt Miriam in Poughkeepsie, you know? So none of those people are leaving. So it's got a long way to go in terms of losing the user base. But core idea that Brad brought to us still stands, which is first you're going to see the B2C problem, the business to consumer problem get tightened on Reddit. Then you're going to see the B2B problem get tightened, and that's the advertisers and other business partners. And then they come for everybody as they squeeze the last dollars out of the platform for the shareholders. And frankly, so that the CEO can cash out usually. So, we're in the process with Reddit in seeing that happen. And so that turns us to the fact that new social media platforms are going to start springing up to begin the first stages of life of shitification, right?
Yes, indeed. But before we go any further into that, I have one more update. YouTube has announced their new CEO, and they sound like they are very pro Web3 and pro NFT. So there's another one for the horizon for you. We're going to see some interesting things coming out of YouTube in the days to come.
You know what's funny? I thought we had put the little corpse of NFT in the ground, and every once in a while it still rises up like I could make a buck for somebody in San Francisco. Yeah. It's amazing. It's I think again, the underlying technology will eventually find a useful application, and it has in some respects. Mm-hmm. But NFTs as constructed for the average person, it's just been a shell game. And so I'm so disappointed anytime I see someone rising to a position of power like this thing with YouTube that's been pro NFTs.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
All right, Dave, sit up, try to make yourself a little bit more presentable, button up that shirt. We've got an interview coming up.
Well, Brad, I'm super excited to welcome one of my favorite people in the world of comics onto the podcast today, Caitlin McGurk, not only an associate professor at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, she is the curator of comics and cartoon art for the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, also on the campus, or adjacent to the campus, perhaps is better to say, to Ohio State University. Caitlin, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. What a lovely introduction. You too are one of my favorite people. And Brad, I don't know you yet, but I think you'll be on my list soon.
Well, listen, it only goes up from here.
That's right. Caitlin is a dang delight in terms of not only talking about comics and knowing about comics, but just as a human being. So I'm so happy to have you on here. But let's talk first. Did I have it right in saying that the Billy Ireland is on the campus, or is adjacent to the campus, or what's the best way to describe it?
Yeah, we are on the campus. I mean, the campus makes up, the vast majority of Columbus, Ohio. But we are administratively part of the Ohio State University. We're one of the special collection libraries within the greater university library system.
Gotcha. And the Billy Ireland describes itself as a research library of American cartoons and comic art, right? That's the best way to describe what it does?
Yes, indeed. Though I will say that's kind of when we were founded, we were really focused entirely on American cartoon art. But over the past decade or more, we've really expanded to other collecting areas, especially manga and bande dessinée and things like that. So the American part of that sentence is the only part that's not quite as accurate anymore.
Gotcha. Well, I guess a better, broader question, and we should open this up for you to answer at length, is what does the Billy Ireland do as a cartoon library and museum?
So we are here to preserve and protect and share the history of comics and cartoon art. We pretty much collect everything related to comics and cartoon art. We're the largest collection in the world at this point. We've got over 3 million items in the collection.
Cool.
But we're also part of a public university. So OSU is a land grant institution. And so we're not here just to, keep this stuff hidden away and protected. We're here to share it, and to not only share it with the Ohio State University community of students and researchers and faculty, but also with the general public, comics fans, researchers from all over the world, cartoonists themselves who consider this place to be like a mecca, and to also, keep it safe and keep it, publicly accessible until the end of time.
Well, now what drew you to the Billy Ireland Museum? In other words, like how did you first get involved with the museum?
It's a very long story to tell you my whole path to comics librarianship, but I'll see what I can get to in a nutshell. So, this is, as I said, the largest collection in the entire world. And when I was younger, I was making my own comics and zines. I had an undergraduate degree in English and creative writing. And when I decided to pursue my master's in library science, I went into it specifically with the crazy idea of trying to become a comics librarian. And what I thought at that point was that it might mean just like working at a public library and building a little graphic novel collection, And what it led to instead was some really amazing opportunities, like interning at Marvel Comics and help building their archive. I was the first and head librarian at the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont. And then I got to the top of the mountain here at the Billy Ireland about 11 years ago. And there's no place I'd rather be. It's truly, truly my dream job.
Yeah, it is. And I'll jump in here from a personal reflection. I've been lucky enough, and you remember this trip, Caitlin, I've been lucky enough to go to Angoulême and the museum there. I've not yet gone to the Tonton Museum or to some of the ones that are in Japan. But in my own mind, at least in North America, you were right in describing it as a mecca. It is a physically gorgeous building that then has collections with Watterson, with Eisner, with Borgman, with McKay, with Walt Kelly. I mean, who else am I mentioning or not mentioning in that, Caitlin?
Oh my gosh, so many more. I mean, since we're the world's largest, we've got stuff from, we've got political and editorial cartoons dating back to the 1600s. We've got tons of original art from graphic novel pages, from comic strip art, from Disney animation, like everything in between. Lots of great work by New Yorker cartoonists. I mean, countless things. I think we've got thousands of artists represented in our collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that in mind, this may be an unfair question, but I'm gonna try it anyway. Do you have a favorite piece? Do you have one thing that it just sparkles every time you see it for you?
Wow, that is a really great question. Well, I will say that on my interview tour, so what I was given when I, came to for my campus interview 11 years ago, the thing that I requested to see was the original Winsor McCay Little Nemo and Slumberland pieces, which there are quite a few of here. And I wept when I saw them, which may have gotten me the job. I have no idea. But I will also, as an aside, say you would be surprised or maybe not surprised at how many people cry when they come here and see stuff for the first time.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Cartoon and comic art is so connected to our childhood, not saying that it's all obviously for kids, but it's just, it does something to people emotionally when they see some of this stuff that was so profound for them. So I mentioned the Winsor McCay stuff just to say that 11 years later, I still get very overwhelmed every time I look at it. It does not get old, and in addition to that, we've got a really substantial collection by one of my favorite cartoonists. Her name was Barbara Sherman. She was one of the first female cartoonists for The New Yorker, and I'm actually writing a book about her right now for Fantagraphics.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then, so much more. It is one of those, you can't name your favorite child type things, but I've got some
Yeah.
I've got some go-to pieces. I've got some go-to collections. I'm really passionate about early newspaper comic art, especially really like weird obscurities
Yeah.
from the 1910s. So
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Well, can I ask you, because the last time I was at the Billy Ireland, I think you were the kind, I don't know if it was you or Jenny, but I think it was you, kindly took me through the sort of stacks and the trays. And I would actually like to expand on the Winsor McKay thing, because I have seen a lot of original comic art in my life. I was a volunteer curator at the Center for Cartoon and Caricature Studies in Canterbury, England. So I worked the archives there. I have never seen an original like Winsor McKay, both in terms of size and scope. And I don't know how to say it, Caitlin, but like he didn't make mistakes, which was bonkers. I mean, there are mistakes on Winsor McKay's, but for the most part, given how complicated and huge they are, like, could you talk for a minute about what makes them so unique as original pieces?
I mean, so much. Like you said, the scale. So they are gigantic. I could pull up the exact measurements, but I mean they're quite huge. And the only other originals that we have that are around that size are probably Hal Foster's Prince Valiant
those are gigantic,
originals, which are also gigantic. But McKay's Little Nemo originals are so intricate. And, he wasn't necessarily using things like photo reference, and they're so fantastic. And obviously the things that everyone knows that he's notable for, playing with really unique panel design and stuff like that is incredible to see in person. His background was in vaudeville and circuses, and so he's integrating so much of that kind of like burlesque stuff into the work itself. But you're right that it does appear to have no mistakes in it, which is also like amazing and infuriating and crazy. And we, of course, can't tell necessarily if he was, penciling and then erasing it or what, but you don't see a ton of pencil lines. You don't see whatever, that version of whiteout would have been back then. Every once in a while, there'll be something he just straight up crosses out and has redrawn. But otherwise, they're seemingly perfect, and they're so the line is so thin and lovely, and he's especially for the backgrounds. And one of the things that I always like to point out to people when they're really seeing his originals, which of course are all in black and white. People think McKay and his amazing color work.
Right.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
McKay was not coloring those pages.
Yeah.
That was done entirely by the printers, who are forgotten about and understudied. But when you look at his originals, which are all black and white, you can see that he's rendered the characters in this really thick outline.
Yes.
And the backgrounds, so to speak, are in this really thin line. And it almost feels like he's, predicting cell animation, just as he would come to become one of the inventors of it.
Yeah.
So they're so, you can get really lost in them. And there's so much to study in each individual panel.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because your collection of McKay's art, I think it's unrivaled in the world, but also it's so fun to go from McKay and then go over to Watterson, who are, I like when Bill sent us the original art for the strip poster, I was amazed at how small it was. He said he draws so compact, it feels like, much more than I thought it would be before I saw his original.
It's almost at print size. Yeah, almost at print size, which is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. So it's so fun. That's the kind of thing that you can really only do at the Billy Ireland, is to see that kind of contrast in how so many artists who were self-taught in how to do quote unquote comics, they didn't know what size to start from or what size to, so that, some people gigantic, some tiny, some anyway. So for you with archives, how is the Billy Ireland handling the digital archives of cartoonists in a world that has fewer and fewer pieces of physical original art?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that we're dealing with constantly. And libraries the world over are dealing with and haven't entirely figured out yet. It used to be that when an artist passes away or, is leaving us their collection, we'd get a semi-truck, at our loading dock full of this artist's, whole career. And now we get a hard drive. And it certainly helps us with physical storage space, because let me tell you, we never want to move this library again. That was a real pain 10 years ago when we had to relocate facilities. So it's good in one sense that it helps us with physical storage space, but it presents obviously a ton of challenges. So challenges of preservation, challenges of access, and for us in particular, challenges of how do we display this stuff in a way that's actually interesting in our museum, because call me old fashioned. I don't really love like looking at screens in a museum. I'd much rather look at the actual physical piece. So it is challenging, and I can't say that anyone has figured it out entirely, but we are actually preserving the stuff at the very least. It goes into basically a dark archive or a cloud that is a server that's constantly being updated and refreshed and preserved through the OSU library system. But in our galleries, we've started to incorporate some born digital art using tablets, and sometimes if someone maybe does their inks on paper but does the rest digitally, we'll be able to show both, like have the tablets next to an original art
that's fun.
and the tablet is showing the final piece.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah. No, I understand it can be a massive challenge for libraries and museums like yourself. So I was just curious how that's the idea of displaying final art on a tablet next to original that's a fun idea just as an outsider looking in. That's really clever.
It is. And I will say, too, that something we're trying to do, I mean, we've always, a big part of, our service that we provide here is working with cartoonists throughout their lives and careers, but especially people who are, getting ready to think about maybe preserving their legacy with us and discussing with them how to best preserve their born digital stuff. We really want people to save various specific versions of the process of their digital artwork. There's of course specific file types that we want this stuff saved in. And then equally important to us is the archives. So that's, your Gmail account. And we've worked with cartoonists to talk about folder filing systems in their email accounts, where when that stuff comes to us, we're able to easily sort through what was business correspondence, what was fan mail, what was, this and that. And that helps us, better preserve and make accessible the information to patrons down the line.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was excited to see. One of the popular software packages for comics artists, Clip Studio.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'm really kind of excited about is that they have built into their software something that basically can give you a time-lapse video of the drawing process.
Oh, wow.
And I've been really kind of encouraging people to turn that on. It doesn't have, from what I can see, it doesn't have a big load on the computer, on that central processing unit. But when you're done, you can export a time-lapse and have basically a step-by-step recreation of how that image was built.
Oh, wow.
Whether you brought in reference or, So I've been really trying to encourage people to keep that turned on because in terms of archiving, that adds a little bit that we're missing. I remember seeing a Jack Kirby piece, and it, like you said, your reaction to Winsor McCay, you actually picture Kirby touching that paper and blowing cigar smoke around as he's working on that.
Yeah.
And, that's something we're going to lose. But having that time lapse aspect where you can see that drawing process recreated, I think is some way that you can kind of give back to that, archival feel.
You're absolutely right. And I think that what you're getting at, and what that gets at showing is the artist's hand. And that's what's missing in the final digital artwork that we don't see, because it is so amazing to look at original art here in person at the Billy Ireland, and especially seeing people, McKay aside, who, you can see original pencil lines, and then you can see the changes that they made when they inked it, and you can see choices being made, and it's active and alive, and you really feel a sense again of the artist's hand, which something like what you were just describing on Clip Studio Paint would do. So, so that's wonderful. I was actually not even aware of that. That's great to know, and maybe we'll encourage people to send us those as well, because it really, it shows the process and brings it to life so much more.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of artist hand, one thing that I, until you guys mentioned the idea of an artist hand, it didn't occur to me, but one of the things that I find lovely about the Billy Ireland is you also have a small but noticeable collection of desks, but then also a collection of the physical materials that artists would use to make their comics. And the times that I've been there and they've been on like this artist from the 70s or this artist from the 60s or this artist from the 90s and how their materials shaped their art was also fun to see, because you don't see that in cartooning a lot, to see like these were the 5 pens or these were the quills or this was the desk, or that's just a uniquely awesome thing to see.
It's true. And we can't obviously like keep that stuff from everyone, and we've got to be choosy about it. We can't keep absolutely everything. But there are materials like that are really important to see, because the types of material people use change over time. People are excited to, see the nib size that a certain artist used for, a certain comic strip they were working on. We also save stuff, of course, like color separations and, the history of print and printmaking is so obviously directly interwoven, inseparable from the history of comics. And so to be able to see all these different steps and the way this stuff used to be produced to reach an audience is really important, just as important as those tools are.
Yeah.
So, Caitlin, I know there's a whole lot of things coming up at the Billy Ireland Museum. How much can you tell us about what's on the calendar as we go forward?
Yeah, so we've got 2 awesome exhibits up right now that both just opened in November and are going to run through May 7th. One of them is Man Saves Comics, Bill Blackbeard's Treasure of 20th Century Newspapers.
Wow.
I co-curated that exhibit, and when it comes to like favorites here, like that collection is my favorite collection by far that we have here. I mean, I love many of them, but it's so squarely like in my wheelhouse and sweet spot of crazy old obscure comic strips. If people are not familiar with Bill Blackbeard by name, he was this fascinating man who was a comics historian, a researcher, a scholar, a fan, a writer about and writer of, and collector. And throughout his life, he amassed 2.5 million comic strip clippings in his house in California. And he named his house the San Francisco Academy of Comic Art. He used his collection to write many of his own very, very important books about comics history, and would loan out and share materials from his house with other researchers and fans. Basically, without getting too off the rails here, tell you a little bit about it. When Bill Blackbeard was doing this back in the 50s and 60s, he found out that libraries all over the world really were converting their collections of old bound volumes of newspapers to microfilm, and then throwing the bound volumes of newspapers in the garbage. And this is a thing that happened everywhere. And the vast majority of these physical objects are gone. But Bill Blackbeard was specifically interested in the comics, which were in vibrant color, and microfilm is only in black and white. And so he, started his lifelong work of collecting as many or all of American comics as he possibly could in their actual print format and preserving them. So that collection came to us 25 years ago in 6 semi-trucks, and we've been and we've been cataloging it since 1998 when it arrived, and we're about 30% through the process of it. So this exhibit celebrates the 25th anniversary of it coming here, and also shows off some of the amazing things that we've discovered in the collection so far.
Wow. Okay, so that's the first one. So that what was the second one? I think you mentioned there was a second one that's going up.
Yeah, so the second one that's up is actually a traveling exhibit that we borrowed from the University of Oregon, and it's called The Art of the News, Comics Journalism. So while the Man Saves Comics show has some really, really old stuff in it, this one is super, super contemporary. So some of the artists included in it are Joe Sacco, Andy Warner, Sarah Glidden, Ben Passmore, and it's people who do a lot of work for things like the Nib, for example. They're folks who are doing, journalism through the form of comics.
That's fantastic. Oh, now I want to fly out to Ohio State.
Yeah, come visit.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Well, all things. In all honesty, my wife and I have to redo our sort of estate and will planning coming up in the next year or two, and so I do have to find the paperwork for you. If Ohio State would like it to donate my stuff when I kick it to Ohio State, because I would love for that to be the final resting place of it. So that's how much I love that collection. It's a gorgeous collection.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Brad and I, thank you so much for giving us your time and talents today. It is first of all, it's a delight to talk to you again after a good long while. And the work you are doing at the Billy Ireland is so delightful and so wonderful for the art and history of comics that as two lovers and practitioners of the art, Brad and I cannot thank you enough for what you do.
You are so welcome, and it was great to chat with you both. Thanks for having me.
I just got to say, coming out of that interview, Brad, and it's a reminder to everyone that if you have any kind of trip that's taking you through, by, or near Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, boy, howdy, do I recommend the Billy Ireland Museum. It is a wonderful, you could do, if you're like me, you could do a full day there. The displays are always wonderful. They always have, like any good museum, they have rotating shows. So you'll see something new if you've been there before. But also, it's the only place in the world to see like Watterson's art right next to Marvel and DC art, right next to some of the best political cartoonists of the 20th century. And it really is an incredible place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But do plan on spending the day. If you go, absolutely plan on spending the entire day. Speaking of which, it feels like we've spent an entire day sitting here talking comics, but it's just been an hour. But don't worry about it. We'll be back next week to spend another hour with you talking comics here on ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my pizza guzzling friend, Brad Geiger. Guggling? What the guggling?
I like guggling.
He's the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the author of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
Yep, it's a pair of pants that don't fit. I don't like it. I'm a cartoonist. I'm not an author. It's weird. I will say that the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard, who we cannot say thank you to enough. He saves our bacon every week with his talents. He is of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, where we are still cleaning up over there. Thank you so much to all of our Spotify listeners. And you may hear your review featured on a future podcast.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/okay. So here's what I would do. I would tell Stan the plot of The Incredible Hulk. Bam! The boy is hit by gamma radiation. He's hit and he turns into an incredible man beast. Go draw some bullshit and I'll put some dialogue in later. That's going to be fantastic. Hey, Jack Kirby, you got a minute? Here's your old pal Stan coming in from the bullpen.
Yeah, Jack. I'm Jack.
It fell apart. Oh, within seconds.
Okay, start again.
Here, if you ever want to try to impersonate Jack Kirby, here's what you do. Hold your hands up and curl your fingers in and just make your hands 50 times larger than they need to be. Now you're Jack Kirby, okay?
Okay.
Hey, quick question, Jack. Quick question for you. It's 1973. I wanted to ask you, the deep V on this shirt, too deep or still deep, but not deep enough? That's what I wanted to ask you.
Stan, I can't see your belly button yet, so I'd say not deep enough.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to the Playboy Mansion tonight. It's a great to be Stan Lee in 1973.